Now, we've talked about the Splatoon wiper, so let's actually talk about the flagship weapon of Splatoon 3, the Tri-Stringer. The other new class, this time actually based around bows, the Tri-Stringer is already looking to be where the weapon of how it's played is very dependent on who you ask. But the real question here today is it good or bad? Today I'll go over the Tri-Stringer, just the original one, not the reef-lux, go over the good, the bad, and give my thoughts on if it has a place in the meta. So let's just jump right into it. The Tri-Stringer, as mentioned, is the flagship weapon of the game, kind of like how the dualies were the flagship of the second game. A lot of the promotional art around Splatoon 3 heavily focuses on the Stringer, so you'd think they'd be really pushing it, trying to ensure that it'd be good, right? Well, the Tri-Stringer is a funky type of weapon. A weapon that sort of plays like a charger, but isn't a charger at the same time. You hold to prepare your shot like a charger or a splatling, but when it's fully charged, the shots leave behind sticky bombs. These bombs can stick to walls, floors, pretty much anything, and then explode a bit after. When not fully charged, they aren't bombs that come out at all. The weapon fires depending on if you're grounded or in the air. When standing, the shots fire horizontally. When in the air, they fire vertically instead. This charge is how you greatly affect handling fights. A little mistake with being in the air on accident can really determine where you get a kill in the end. But what is the damage like? Well, tap shots do 30, while fully charged arrows do 35, and then the sticky bombs it leaves behind range from 50 to 80, depending on the proximity. This will allow the weapon at a fully charged, close range to do 105 damage. The damage of the weapon is sort of all over the place, and not the type of damage you'd expect to see from a weapon like this. However, this is where I find one of the first misunderstandings about the weapon. Most people I see playing this weapon, or talk about it, compare it to something like the Bamboozler or Squiffer, viewed as a closer range charger but with its own quirk, but this is where I see the fault. The weapon I don't feel really excels being played like a charger. While it may act like one, but how it plays is just not a charger. Now, you may be saying, but Silver, in your own gameplay, it looks like you're playing it like a charger. To that I say, true, but I'm also not good at the weapon. The Tri-Stringer is a weapon I see filling more of a midline role where it plays a bit closer to the fight than most chargers, but when played back, it still does have a benefit, the arced shot. The sticky bombs aren't the only quirk of this weapon. The shots the weapon does can actually arc and do fall down damage and catch people over walls and objects. This is the aspect of the weapon I see taking the longest for people to really get a feel for. When people practice the angles and can nail the arc shots, this thing can become incredibly nasty. Shot somebody and then they hit around a wall, well, just shoot up above it and let the sticky bombs fall on their heads. I mean, we already talked about the damage, 50 to 80, that's some pretty good pick-off damage. Once more people get a feel for playing it with these kinds of playstyles, then hiding from a good Tri-Stringer could become incredibly difficult. While there aren't many people investing a ton of time into this weapon right now, there's certainly players who are popping off with it and dropping some big numbers, so it's certainly a weapon I can see bringing some hype moments with some important pickoffs over walls. But what about the kit? Well, the sub-weapon is Toxic Mist, a sub I've been very vocal about my disdains for. The sub that costs way too much for what little benefit it brings, now paired on the new weapon. They sadly didn't adjust the cost of it, but with the meta right now, I feel like it actually could be somewhat useful. What Toxic Mist does for the Tri-Stringer is make it easier for it to follow up shots. An enemy that has been slowed or have their escape route cut off is an easier target to hit, and it can be very useful for also aiding teammates that are already engaging with an enemy. But generally, Toxic Mist is still very much a very meh sub that really needed some help. The special, on the other hand, is a lot better. The Killer Whale 5.1, before launch I had predicted that this special would be mostly used as a way to enable a push or enable a weapon to move up into a better position, and that's actually how it ended up panning out. For the Stringer, the whale is actually a good way to force out enemies that would normally keep the weapon in check. Using your whale as you push up with your team, or using it as you try and displace a charger or splatling is the name of the game. It's not a weapon that can really spam it. While the paint is decent, you certainly won't be farming this one for sure, so you certainly got to make them count, and utilizing them to enable your own movement and let you push up more aggressively is how I see it working out best for this weapon. So how does the weapon fare against other things being run at this time? At the time of making this, we're still in Season 1, which means sloshing machine is still pretty rampant, though the Splash-O-Matic has increased greatly in popularity and has become one of the most common shooters you'll see. Against these, the Tri-Stringer actually does pretty well, as it outranges the machine, which is the important part, and certainly outranges the Splash. Where the Stringer loses is in the mobility aspect. These two weapons are pretty mobile in comparison, but thankfully the Stringer has a tool to deal with that, the Toxic Mist. If Toxic Mist has done one thing right this entire time, it's annoy high mobility weapons. A Splash is likely to try and flush you out with burst bombs, but if they do, being stuck in the toxic mist will only result in them instantly losing all their ink just trying to displace you. And the machine sits in a similar situation, where it wants to use its fidgety bombs for a lot of chip damage and displacement. Being in the mist, it just can't really stand there for too long doing this. Now, this of course doesn't mean you'll always win, there's always going to be something dependent on the player, but at a service level, the Tri-Stringer does have the tools to deal with some of the top picks at the moment. The only issue it has are weapons that are longer range than it. Stringer has to stay exposed for long periods of time in order to constantly output paint and arc shots, so with things like splatlings and chargers, you just become a sitting duck. So knowing where these weapons are and how much they have range over you and the overall game sense plays a big role in how effective this weapon may be in the long run. Much like the Splatoon wiper, the Stringer is a weapon I can see doing very well when the time is put into it. These weapons have the type of design we'd like to see, weapons that reward dedication and learning over just getting free value. Skillful weapons are always going to be more interesting, and both these weapons are clear examples of skill being a requirement. This makes them have a higher skill floor than most, with the highest skill ceiling. They've certainly got a lot of potential in the right hands. If you're interested in learning more about the Stringer, fellow YouTuber and my friend Pika Dave made a video on the class. I'll leave a link to that video in the description. I highly advise you not only check out their video, but check out all their content. There's some good stuff there. If I had to place Tri-Stringer in a tier, I'd probably put it smack dab in the middle of B. A good amount of potential, only held back by the amount of time and map knowledge needed to truly get the value from it. But once that one player who spends months in the lab with this weapon appears and pop-offs, I can see heads turning for this weapon. So is it good or bad? I'd say it's actually pretty good. Currently it does have a chance at a decent spot in a comp that is built well around it. It can handle a lot of the good picks that are being used at this time, but like I've said multiple times already, just sort of held back by the amount of time needed to unlock that potential. It'll be a weapon I'll certainly keep my eyes on, and I'll await the day that you see a big pop-off in a tournament. So with that, I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.